Hi there, welcome to Fantasy Hub. I'm Mia, your storyteller. Today's story is filled with heartache, discovery, and a twist you won't see coming. So let's begin.
Picture, if you will, a Tuesday morning in September. The kind of morning where the air carries the weight of change, though we mortals rarely recognize such omens until they've already transformed our lives forever. Holly Nelson sat in the sterile conference room of Henderson and Associates, her trembling fingers wrapped around a pen that felt heavier than any burden she'd ever carried. 32 years of life had led her to this moment, signing divorce papers while her soon-to-be ex-husband Mark Washington sat across from her, his expensive suit crisp as his lawyer's calculated smile. The irony wasn't lost on her. His new surname would remain Washington, same as his secretary-turned-fiancé, same as the nameplate that would soon disappear from Holly's nursing station at St. Mary's Hospital. She had taken his name in love, worn it like a badge of honor for 8 years, and now she was shedding it like a snake discards old skin. Holly. Mark's voice cut through the silence, dripping with that patronizing tone she'd grown to despise. You know this is for the best. We both know our marriage was dead. Holly's voice emerged as barely more than a whisper, yet it carried the weight of thunder. Her hazel eyes that had once sparkled with devotion for this man, now held the cold fire of a woman scorned. Our marriage was dead the moment you decided Jennifer's 24-year-old body was more appealing than the life we'd built together. The lawyer cleared his throat uncomfortably. These proceedings had been going on for months, each session chipping away another piece of Holly's heart. But today was different. Today, she felt something new stirring beneath the ashes of her former life. You see, dear listener, there comes a moment in every soul's journey when we must choose between remaining victims of our circumstances or becoming architects of our destiny. Holly Nelson was about to discover which path her spirit would choose. As she signed her name, Holly Nelson, not Washington, never Washington again. For the final time, something shifted in the room's energy. The divorce was finalized. The papers stamped, the life she'd known officially dead and buried. But as Holly walked out of that building and into the crisp September air, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the intoxicating rush of complete freedom. Asterisk 3. Weeks had passed since that fateful Tuesday, and Holly found herself wandering through the community center on Maple Street, drawn by a colorful flyer advertising DIY home renovation workshop, transform your space, transform your life. The tagline felt like a sign from the universe itself. The workshop was held in a large, sun-drenched room that smelled of sawdust and possibility. Holly had arrived early, nursing a coffee that had long since gone cold, watching other participants filter in. She'd signed up on impulse, driven by a desperate need to do something, anything, with her hands besides chart medications and check vital signs. Then she walked in. Sarah Washington, no relation to Mark, thank the heavens, moved through the room like poetry in motion. She was perhaps 35, with shoulder-length auburn hair that caught the afternoon light like fire, and hands that spoke of years spent crafting, building, creating. But it was her eyes that stopped Holly cold, deep green, like forest pools, filled with a warmth that seemed to reach across the room and touch something long dormant in Holly's chest. Welcome, everyone. Sarah's voice carried the confident timbre of someone completely at home in her own skin. I'm Sarah, and I believe that every space and every person has unlimited potential for transformation. Today, we're going to discover yours. Ah, the cruel beauty of timing, my child. How often does the universe place exactly what we need directly in our path, just when we're brave enough to reach for it? As Sarah demonstrated basic carpentry techniques, Holly found herself mesmerized not just by the lesson, but by the way Sarah's muscles moved beneath her flannel shirt, the gentle authority in her voice, the way she patiently corrected another participant's grip on a power drill without a trace of condescension. Holly, isn't it? Sarah appeared beside her workstation, where Holly was struggling to cut a straight line with a handsaw. Here, let me show you. When Sarah's hands covered hers, guiding the saw in smooth, confident strokes, Holly felt a jolt of electricity she hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't just attraction, though the warmth spreading through her chest certainly felt like desire. It was recognition, soul recognizing soul. There, Sarah smiled, stepping back to admire Holly's. Now straight cut, you've got natural instincts. You just need to trust them. Trust them. The words echoed in Holly's mind as she drove home that evening. Her car filled with the scent of sawdust and the intoxicating memory of Sarah's touch. Asterisk. The autumn leaves were painting the world in shades of gold and crimson when Holly found herself returning to the community center the following Tuesday, ostensibly for the second workshop session, but truthfully because she couldn't stop thinking about Sarah Washington. This week's lesson focused on refinishing furniture, and Holly had brought an old jewelry box, a wedding gift from Mark's mother that she'd been meaning to throw away. Instead, Sarah helped her sand away the old finish, revealing the beautiful oak grain beneath. Sometimes, Sarah mused, running her fingers over the newly exposed wood, the most beautiful things are hidden under layers of other people's expectations. The comma hit Holly like a physical blow. She set down her sandpaper and looked at Sarah really looked at her for the first time. Are we still talking about furniture? Holly asked quietly. Sarah's green eyes met hers, and in them Holly saw understanding, invitation, and something that made her pulse quicken. We're talking about whatever you need us to be talking about, Sarah replied. Here, child, is where our story takes its first real turn. For Holly was about to discover that their heart has its own compass, one that cares nothing for society's expectations or the narrow paths we think we're supposed to walk. After the workshop, Sarah approached Holly as she packed up her supplies. There's a coffee shop down the street. Really good apple cinnamon scones, if you're not in a hurry. Holly's nursing shift didn't start until 7 the next morning. She had nowhere to be, nothing waiting for her except an empty apartment and leftover Chinese takeout. I'd like that, she heard herself say. The Grounded Bean was exactly the kind of place Holly had always avoided with Mark. Too bohemian, too eclectic, filled with mismatched furniture and local art, but sitting across from Sarah in a worn velvet armchair, surrounded by the warm hum of conversation and the rich aroma of coffee beans, Holly felt more at home than she had in years. So, Sarah stirred honey into her herbal tea. What's your story, Holly Nelson? The question should have been simple. Instead, it opened something in Holly's chest like a floodgate. She told Sarah about Mark, about the betrayal, about the way she lost herself somewhere in 8 years of trying to be the perfect wife. She talked about her work as a nurse, how helping others heal had become her way of avoiding her own wounds. She even confessed her recent obsession with true crime podcasts, anything to fill the silence in her empty apartment. Sarah listened without judgment, without offering unsolicited advice, without trying to fix anything. She simply held space for Holly's pain, her confusion, her anger. Can I tell you something? Sarah said when Holly finally fell silent. 6 years ago, I was married to David. Good man, loved him dearly, but I was living his life, not mine. Took my years to realize I was gay, longer to accept it, even longer to do something about it. Holly's coffee cup froze halfway to her lips. You're as gay as the day is long. Sarah grinned. And happier than I've ever been in my life. The revelation should have been shocking. Instead, it felt like a key turning in a lock Holly hadn't even known existed. Asterisk. Time, dear child, is a river that carries us forward whether we're ready or not. By November, Holly had become a regular at Sarah's workshops. Though they both knew she was no longer there to learn about woodworking. Their friendship had deepened into something that made Holly's skin tingle and her heart race in ways she'd almost forgotten were possible. They texted throughout the day, sharing photos off their projects, inside jokes, observations about life. Holly found herself looking forward to these exchanges more than anything else in her routine, but it was during their fourth coffee shop conversation that Sarah dropped a bombshell that will change everything. I have a confession, Sarah said, her fingers drumming nervously against her mug. The D workshops? They're not my main gig. Holly raised an eyebrow. Mysterious. What's your main gig? I'm a fight coach. Underground, a circuit. Holly nearly choked on her scone. You're joking. Dead serious. There's a whole network of female fighters who compete for real money. Not like if-sanctioned leagues. This is raw, primal, honest. And the pay is incredible if you're good at it. Sarah went on to explain that she'd started fighting to pay for her divorce lawyer, then discovered she had a natural talent for it. Now she coached other women, teaching them not just fighting techniques, but self-defense, confidence, the kind of bone-deep strength that comes from knowing you can protect yourself. Why are you telling me this? Holly asked, though part of her already knew. Sarah's green eyes burned with intensity. Because I see something in you, Holly, anger, pain, strength you don't even know you have. And I think you might want to learn how to use it. The universe, my child, has a way of presenting us with exactly what we need, precisely when we need it. But it's up to us to have the courage to reach out and grasp it. That night, Holly lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling. Sarah's proposition echoing in her mind, fighting. The idea was insane. She was a nurse, a healer. She'd never been in a fight in her life, had spent 8 years with Mark learning to swallow her anger, to be accommodating, to avoid conflict at all costs. But as she thought about Mark's smug face in that conference room, about Jennifer's triumphant smile at the grocery store, about all the nights she'd cried herself to sleep feeling powerless and betrayed, the idea began to seem less insane and more like exactly what she needed. She texted Sarah at midnight. "I want to learn." The response came immediately. "Training starts tomorrow at 6. Wear clothes you can move in." Asterisk Sarah's gym was nothing like the chrome and mirrors fitness centers Holly had imagined, located in the basement of an old warehouse. It was a temple to raw power. Heavy bags hung from exposed beams, wrestling mats covered the concrete floor, and the air thrummed with the energy of women pushing their bodies and spirits to their limits. "This is Holly," Sarah announced to the 6 other women present. "She's going to be training with us." The introductions were a blur. Maria, a construction worker saving money for her daughter's school. Janet, a teacher whose husband had been abusing her for years. Keiko, a software developer who discovered fighting helped her anxiety better than any medication. And others, each with their own story, their own reasons for learning to fight. But it was the training itself that transformed Holly. Sarah was patient but demanding, teaching Holly basic stances, how to throw a proper punch, how to move her body like a weapon. The first few sessions left Holly so sore she could barely function at work, her muscles screaming from uses they'd never experienced. But with the physical pain came something unexpected, clarity. "You're holding back," Sarah observed during their third session, as Holly hit the heavy bag with obvious restraint. "What are you afraid of?" "Hurting someone," Holly panted, sweat streaming down her face. "The bag?" Holly stopped punching. "Myself." Sarah stepped closer, close enough that Holly could smell her shampoo, see the tiny scarab over her left eyebrow. "Holly," she said softly, "you've been hurting yourself for years. You just did it slowly, quietly, invisibly. This," she gestured to the bag, "this is honest pain, productive pain, pain with purpose." That night, Holly unleashed something she'd been carrying for months. She pounded the heavy bag until her knuckles bled, screaming out years of suppressed rage, frustration, and grief. When she finally collapsed, gasping and shaking, Sarah was there with water and understanding. "Better?" Sarah asked. Holly nodded, unable to speak. She felt empty and full simultaneously, drained yet energized. For the first time since signing those divorce papers, she felt alive. And so our Holly began her metamorphosis, shedding the cocoon of her former self to discover the butterfly warrior that had been waiting within all along. Asterisk by December, the dynamic between Holly and Sarah had shifted into something neither woman could deny any longer. What had begun as student and teacher had evolved into something deeper, more complex, more dangerous. They were sparring on a Tuesday evening, the gym empty except for them. Holly had progressed remarkably quickly. Her natural athleticism and months of pent-up fury translated into genuine fighting skill. But tonight, something was different. As they grappled on the mat, their bodies pressed together in ways that had nothing to do with martial arts. Holly felt the familiar electricity she'd experienced that first day in the workshop. Sarah's breath was warm against her ear, her strong hands gentle even in combat, and when their eyes met. Time stopped. "Holly," Sarah whispered, her voice rough with something that wasn't exertion, and then they were kissing. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was hungry, desperate, months of tension and attraction expelling into something that left Holly's knees weak and her heart hammering against her ribs. Sarah's lips tasted like mint and possibility, her hands tangling in Holly's sweat-dampened hair, and Holly felt something in her chest break open like dawn. When they finally broke apart, both women were breathing hard. Holly started, then stopped. What could she say? That she'd never kissed a woman before, but it felt like coming home. That every touch from Sarah felt more real than 8 years with Mark. That she was falling in love with someone who was teaching her to be dangerous. "I know," Sarah said simply. "Me too." Love, dear child, rarely arrives when we expect it or in the forms we think we want. Sometimes it comes disguised as a woodworking class, sometimes as a fight coach, Sometimes it's that garage to become who we were always meant to be. They made love. That night in Sarah's apartment above the gym, and Holly discovered that her body was capable of pleasures she'd never imagined. Every touch was revelation, every whisper a prayer to gods she didn't know she worshipped. Sarah mapped her scars, physical and emotional, with lips and fingers that promised healing. Afterward, lying in Sarah's strong arms, Holly felt at peace. She'd never experienced with Mark Dot. This wasn't just desire or rebellion or rebound romance. This was recognition. Soul meeting soul at last. What happens now? Holly whispered into the darkness. Sarah's arms tightened around her. Now we figure out how to build something real. But peace, my child, is often the eye of the storm, not its end. Just as Holly was beginning to believe in happiness again, the universe decided to test the strength of what she and Sarah had built. Holly's first real fight was scheduled for January 15th, a newcomer bout against another rookie fighter. Winner takes $2,000. She'd been training for 2 months. Her body transformed from soft nurse into lean fighter, her confidence growing with every session. The underground fighting circuit Sarah coached operated in the shadows of legality, match-filled, in repurposed warehouses, attended by people who understood that some battles couldn't be fought in official arenas. It wasn't brutal or bloodthirsty. It was honest combat between consenting adults, with strict rules about safety and sportsmanship. But 3 days before Holly's debut fight, Mark Washington decided to make one final play for control. Holly was leaving St. Mary's after a particularly grueling shift when she found Mark waiting by her car in the parking garage. He looked exactly the same, expensive suit, self-satisfied smile, wedding ring glinting on his finger. The sight of him made her stomach clench with familiar anxiety. "Hello, Holly. What do you want, Mark?" She didn't stop walking toward her car, keys ready in her hand like Sarah had taught her. "I want to talk to you about this phase you're going through." Holly stopped. Phase? This whole angry lesbian fighter thing. "Jennifer saw you at some coffee shop with that butch woman, and frankly, Holly, it's embarrassing. You're making a fool of yourself." The old Holly would have shrunk under his disapproval, would have made excuses or promiscuity be more discreet. But the new Holly, the Holly who could drop a grown woman with abruptly thrown punch, felt something else entirely. She laughed. "Embarrassing to whom, Mark? You? The man who threw away 8 years of marriage for a woman half his age?" Mark's face flushed. That was different. "Jennifer and I have something real. This, whatever you're doing with that woman, it's just rebellion. Acting out because you're hurt. You know what, Mark?" Holly stepped closer and was gratified to see him take a step back. "You're right. I am hurt and angry, and I was acting out. But not with Sarah. I was acting out for 8 years, pretending to be someone I'm not so you'd love me. Well, guess what? I don't need your love anymore. I don't need your approval. I don't need anything from you." She turned to walk away, but Mark grabbed her arm. It was a mistake, moving on instinct and 2 months of training. Holly twisted out of his grip and pinned his arm behind his back against her car. Mark yelped in surprise and pain. "Don't ever touch me again," she said quietly, her voice deadly calm. "And stay away from Sarah." She released him and got in her car, leaving Mark rubbing his shoulder and staring after her in shock. But Mark Washington was not a man accustomed to losing, and he had one more card to play. Asterisk. The call came at 3 a.m. on the morning of Holly's fight. Her supervisor at St. Mary's, Nancy Richards, sounded tired and uncomfortable. "Holly, I need you to come in immediately. There's been a complaint filed against you, and hospital administration wants to meet before your shift starts." Holly's blood ran cold. "What kind of complaint?" "Someone called and said you've been involved in illegal fighting. That you're a danger to patients because of violent tendencies. I know it's ridiculous, but I'll be there in 30 minutes. Holly knew exactly who had made that call. The meeting was as humiliating as Mark had undoubtedly intended. 3 hospital administrators, Holly's supervisor, and a representative from HR sat around a conference table while Holly explained that yes, she had been training in martial arts, but no, it had nothing to do with her job performance or patient care abilities. "Ms. Nelson," the chief administrator said, "while we have no proof of any illegal activity, the hospital's insurance requires you is to investigate any allegations that could affect patient safety. You'll need to take a leave of absence until this is resolved." "How long?" 2 weeks minimum. Possibly longer if the complaint escalates. 2 weeks without pay. 2 weeks of doubt and suspicion. 2 weeks of exactly what Mark had intended. But as Holly sat in that sterile conference room, being treated like a criminal for learning to defend herself, she felt something crystallize in her chest. Not defeat, not shame. Fury so purine focused, it was almost religious in its intensity. Mark thought he could destroy her new life the same way he destroyed her old one. Had thought she would crawl back into her shell, abandon Sarah, return to being the docile, controllable woman he'd married. He was about to learn how wrong he was. Fine, Holly said, standing up from the table. I'll take the leave. But when this investigation clears me, and it will, I expect a written apology and assurance that this kind of harassment won't happen again. She walked out of that hospital with her head high and her fists clenched. The fight was in 6 hours. Asterisk. The warehouse where Holly's fight was held thrummed with energy like a living thing. The crowd was small but passionate, maybe 50 people who understood that they were witnessing something raw and real in a world full of manufactured entertainment. Holly sat in the makeshift dressing room, really just a sectioned off corner. Behind a curtain, her hands being wrapped by Sarah, whose touch was steady despite the worry in her green eyes. You don't have to do this, Sarah said quietly. Not today, not after what happened at the hospital. We can postpone. No. Holly's voice was granite. Today is perfect. Today is exactly when this needs to happen. Her opponent was introduced as Razor Rodriguez, a stocky Latina woman with arms like tree trunks and a reputation for ending fights quickly. Holly had seen footage of her previous matches. Razor was experienced, powerful, and completely without mercy. Perfect. Sometimes, dear child, we need to face something genuinely dangerous to discover what we're truly made of. Holly was about to have that revelation when the bell rang. Holly moved like liquid lightning. Months of training, weeks of focused fury, and years of suppressed rage flowed together into something that transcended simple fighting. Holly wasn't just throwing punches. She was exorcising demons, reclaiming power, rewriting the story of who she was allowed to be. Razor came at her like a freight train, but Holly was water around a boulder, flowing around that bigger woman's attacks and striking with surgical precision. Every technique Sarah had taught her, every lesson about leverage and timing and using an opponent's strength against them, combined into something that felt less like fighting and more like dancing. The crowd's roar faded to white noise. The warehouse. Walls dissolved. There was only Holly and her opponent and the pure, honest communication of combat. When Razor's overhead right missed by inches, Holly stepped inside and delivered a combination that would have made Sarah weep with pride. Body. Shot, uppercut, hook, and Razor went down like a felled oak. The referee's count seemed to last forever. 10 seconds that contained Holly's entire transformation from victim to victor. And when Razor couldn't answer the count, when the referee raised Holly's hand in victory, something fundamental shifted in the universe. A woman who had been broken found herself whole. A heart that had been shattered discovered it was actually stronger at the broken places. The crowd erupted. Holly found Sarah's face in the chaos, saw tears streaming down her cheeks, saw love and pride and fierce joy all mixed together in those green eyes that had come her. North Star got $2,000 richer and infinitely wealthier in spirit. Holly walked out of that warehouse a different person than the one who had walked in. Mark's final gambit came 3 days after Holly's victory, in the form of a registered letter to her apartment. Inside was a packet of photographs, her and Sarah kissing, training together, leaving Sarah's apartment early in the morning, accompanied by a typed note. Thought you should know what everyone's saying about you. This isn't over, a friend. Holly stared at the photos spread across her kitchen table. In another life, they would have filled her with shame and terror. In this life, they filled her with something else entirely. Pity. Pity for Ammon so small. And threatened by her happiness that he would hire a private investigator to document it, she gathered the photos, walked to her fireplace, and burned them one by one. Then she called Mark. Did you really think this would work? She asked when he answered. Silence on the other end. Then, I don't know what you're talking about. The photos, Mark. The hospital complaint. The pathetic attempt to destroy my life because you can stand. That I'm happier without you than I ever was with you. Holly, you're not thinking clearly. This woman has brainwashed you into what? Being myself? Into remembering that I'm strong and capable and worthy of love. Into discovering that I prefer to be touched with reverence instead of taken for granted. You don't know what you're doing. You're going to destroy your career, your reputation, my reputation. Holly laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. Mark, I just beat a woman unconscious with my bare hands and got paid $2,000 for it. I've been sleeping with my female fight coach for months. I've never been happier or more myself in my entire life. What exactly do you think you can threaten me with? I can tell everyone what you really are: a lesbian, a fighter, a woman who refuses to be controlled by her ex-husband. Please do not save me the trouble of having to announce it myself. She hung up while he was still sputtering, and that, my child, is how Holly Nelson finally cut the last thread that bound her to a life that had never truly been hers. Asterisk spring came early that year, and with it, a sense of renewal that seemed to touch everything in Holly's world. The hospital investigation had been resolved exactly as she'd predicted, completely cleared of all charges, with written apologies from administration and a stern warning to security about investigating faults. Complaints more thoroughly. Holly had returned to work to find her colleagues treating her with a new respect that had nothing to do with her nursing skills and everything to do with the quiet confidence she now carried. She was still the same caring, competent nurse she'd always been, but now she was that person by choice, not default. The underground fighting circuit had become her second career, providing not just income but a community of strong women who understood that power shared as power multiplied. She'd won 3 more fights and was being courted by several official MMA promotions, but it was the small moments with Sarah that meant the most. Like tonight, as they sat in Sarah's workshop, their workshop. Now, since Holly had officially moved in last month, working on a rocking chair for Sarah's pregnant sister. The radio played old blues while they sanded and shaped and fitted pieces together, their movements entrained by months of training and loving together. Holly, Sarah said suddenly, setting down her sandpaper. Holly looked up from the chair arm she was smoothing. Sarah reached into her tool belt and pulled out something small and wooden, carved into an intricate knot pattern that seemed to flow like water frozen in time. I made this for you, she said, suddenly shy. Well, it's not quite a ring, but Holly's breath caught. The carved piece was beautiful, clearly meant to be worn like jewelry. Beauty was more than that. It was craftsmanship and artistry, and love, all made manifest in wood. It's a Celtic knot, Sarah explained, her fingers tracing the flowing lines. No beginning, no end. Like what we have, like what we've built together. Holly took the carved ring with trembling fingers, turning it in the light. She could see months of careful work in every curve and angle, could feel the love that had guided Sarah's hands as she shaped it. Double quotes. Sarah. Double quotes. I know we haven't talked about the future much. I know this is all new for you, and I don't want no pressure. You, but double quotes. Sarah took a deep breath. I love you, Holly Nelson. I love who you were when I met you. I love who you're becoming, and I love who we are together. And if you'll have them, I want to build something permanent, something that can't be taken away or destroyed. Bismal men with small minds. Here, child, is where our story reaches its true climax. Not in a moment of violence or triumph, but in a moment of quiet recognition between two souls who have found their home in each other. Holly slipped the wooden ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, of course it did, because Sarah had been watching her hands for months, memorizing their shape the way she'd memorized everything else about the woman she loved. Yes, Holly whispered. Yes to all of it. Yes to building something permanent. Yes to a life that can't be taken away. Yes to you, Sarah Washington. When they kissed, the workshop seemed to glow with more than just the warm light of evening. It glowed with possibility, with promises kept and promises yet to be made, with the quiet magic of 2 broken people who had helped each other become whole. Asterisk. And so our story draws toward its close. Though, like all the best stories, it's really a beginning dressed up as an ending. 6 months later, Holly stood in the center of a sanctioned, a cage, her opponent unconscious at her feet, her hand raised in victory while 5,000 people screamed her name. The purse for this fight was 10 times what she'd made in that warehouse where it all began, and sponsors were already calling with offers that would let her quit nursing entirely if she chose. But in the crowd, she found the face that mattered most. Sarah, beaming with pride and love, wearing a shirt that read, "My girlfriend can kick your ass," that made Holly laugh every time she saw it. After the fight, after the interviews and the drug tests and the medical clearances, they drove home together, through the quiet streets of a city that felt entirely different than it had a year ago. Everything looked the same, but Holly saw it all through new eyes, the eyes of a woman who had learned that she was the author of her own story. You know what I was thinking about during the fight? Holly said as they pulled into their driveway. How much you wanted to hurt that poor woman, Holly laughed. How grateful I am to Mark. Sarah nearly drove into their mailbox. I'm sorry, what? If he hadn't cheated, if he hadn't been such a coward and a control freak, if he hadn't tried so hard to destroy me after I left him, I never would have found you. I never would have discovered who I really am. I never would have learned that I'm strong enough to build my own happiness. Sarah parked the car and turned to face her. You would have found your way eventually. Strong people always do, maybe, but I found my way to you, and that makes all the pain worth it. And that, dear listener, is the truth that took these old bones a lifetime to learn. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to us is actually the best thing in disguise. Sometimes betrayal is just the universe's way of clearing the path to something better. Sometimes we have to lose everything we thought we wanted to discover what we actually need got, as Holly and Sarah walked hand in hand toward their home. The home they'd built together with their own hands and hearts. Holly felt the carved ring. On her finger kept the moonlight dot, no beginning, no end. Like love, like strength. Like the story of a woman who learned to fight for herself and found everything she'd ever been looking for in the process. Behind them, their shadows stretched long and powerful across the ground, like the shadows of giants. And perhaps that's exactly what they were. Ordinary people who had dared to become extraordinary, simply by refusing to accept that their story was over just because someone else wanted it to be. Sleep well, child. Dream of your own strength, your own possibilities, your own power to rewrite the story of your life whenever it stops serving your highest good. And remember, sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin with the courage to walk away from the wrong person and toward the right version of yourself. The end is just the beginning in disguise.